Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Leadership Book of the Month, number 42 it is. So very exciting. We started this journey together and 42 books altogether. So welcome back, Brett. Great to have you with us again. Yeah, exciting. Hard to believe.
I would have never thought. We talked about it in our pregame. 40 is a big number. I mean, and 50 is not that far away. So yeah, this is really, really something.
And who knew when you came, he took one of my classes at Rockhurst in university, getting your MBA. And then a year or two later, I invited you to come back as a speaker to one of my classes. And you and your daughter hauled in 100 books. And that you think you're just being nice to come in as a guest speaker. And then lo and behold, this came out of it. So it's very exciting to be on this journey with you.
Thank you.
And do you have an update this month?
Sure. So hi, everybody. Thank you for spending your time with us. Kelly and I always talk about making sure that we're giving each one of you value back. Time is just that most precious commodity that we have, and it's important that when you invest time with us that we give something back. So we'll be giving you some meaningful and actionable content. So I'm going to be really brief with my update. Normally I share quite a bit of color and background about what I'm doing, but I want to give the bulk of our mic time today to Kelly because we had a wonderful pregame this week, and she shared a little bit about Voyage and her story, and I think it's probably worthy of our audience. So my quick update, I attended a board meeting this month rather, and the board meeting was filled with CEOs and some people in the tech space, and eventually we go out to dinner and we're mingling over the couple of days, and the topic of, hey, this leadership book of the month thing comes up, and what are you reading? What am I reading? And we're exchanging content, things like that. And it literally has become my personal brand. I don't know any other way to say it. It's just table stakes of it's who I am, right? It's people are always talking about sports and athletics and your teams and wine and tennis and cigars. My thing is books. I can't understate it any more than that. But my whole point is that as I was at this board meeting and surrounded by CEOs and these entrepreneurs, it was just fascinating to share the authors and the books and the people that we've covered. And I give Kelly a lot of that credit. But my whole point is I kind of put that together. I said, I stole the thing from Jennifer Garner. She's got that deal. What's in your wallet? It's the Bank One thing. And my tag on that is, what's your personal brand? And it's a call to action for our listeners to say, think about that, right? And we've talked about this over the course of our 42 books of being an interesting person. And you think about how you become an interesting person. You have to invest in yourself. You have to grow. You have to develop. You have to have something meaningful to offer. So, if there's a hook there, it's what's your personal brand. So give that some thought. Consider how you're investing in yourself, and then how you're creating what I call the most interesting version of you. People will definitely gravitate to you, but you have to have something to return, something to offer, and obviously that comes from continuing to invest in yourself. So with that, I'm going to tee it up for Kelly, and I'm going to turn it over to her. And I was just fascinated as I started kind of almost interviewing her on Tuesday when we did our pregame about Voyage and what she's done and her journey and all of that. And I'm confident our listeners will find that equally entertaining and obviously equally interesting. So with that, Kelly, the floor is yours.
Oh, thanks. You asked the other day a little bit more about what I do and what Voyage does, and it does kind of fit with that what's in your wallet theme. So I liked that, and the tie of how are you coming across? How are you representing yourself? What's in your wallet for who you are? And that's what Voyage is all about. So I launched it in 2016, and the whole purpose of it is to help leaders address the people side of the business. So the people things that affect revenue, retention, and reputation. So I'd rather than tell more about the services, let me share a story. So several years ago, I was driving from home to the Kansas City Plaza area, and I drive the same way every time, so go by the same businesses. And this one time I noticed that in the spring that year, the landscaping of this business was quite different than usual. And I'm no expert of any of that, but I just noticed it. And so I started asking around because people know what I do. So then they start telling me things that happen inside their companies to get some tips or to see if I can help them. And so I started asking around about this company because I knew that if the landscaping changed that much, they were having some internal issues. So there were financial issues there, or disagreements about what it should be. But I could tell something was going on. And then sure enough, poked around a little bit and there was. So when I contacted the CEO who I'd met before, we weren't friends or anything, but I'd met. And when I said I wanted to have a conversation about their company culture, because I noticed that their landscaping was different. And he kind of laughed and took that with the love and warmth that was intended. And we had a very interesting conversation that led to work over several years. And one of the outcomes of that was the re-engagement of the senior leadership team. So if the senior leadership team isn't engaged, the rest of the people aren't going to be either. So it was a 41% increase in the senior leadership team. So that was one of the outcomes that I was able to help that CEO achieve through the work on company culture and leadership. But it was him doing the work. So the company is Voyage Consulting Group. So I'm not the captain of the ship. I'm like the lighthouse that guides the captain of the ship, especially when there's rough waters or tough times. So hopefully that story helps people understand a little bit about what I do and the impact of the work. And it also ties into today's book. So, yeah, what do you think? Should we go into it?
Well, I want to put kind of a bow on that. I think it's fascinating. Obviously, you gave a very abbreviated update on that. When we spoke on Tuesday, I had the privilege of having Kelly go into much greater detail and depth and talk about her experience and some of the companies that she's worked with, several of the industry, what we consider to be the pillars, if you want to think of it that way, that she's engaged with and kind of models what she does after that. So I hate to say it, but she undersold it and understated it. It's a fascinating story. So, and I'm sure we'll get peeks into more of that as we have our upcoming books. But again, I'm always interested in hearing people's story, particularly people that I think that have been pioneers in their field or have accomplished great things. And we always say we surround ourselves by people that are smarter than ourselves, and obviously Kelly's one of those people. So we can learn from her experience and learn from what she's done, and hopefully we become a better version of ourselves. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the invitation, and I'm glad to share any more if anybody thinks that this applies to them or they want to talk about it. I'll include the link. This is going to be on the LinkedIn. It's live on LinkedIn and on YouTube, so they have contact information through all that. But I'll share it in the response to or in the comment. And I always forget to go look at the comments, but while I'm thinking of it, let me see if anybody has any. So we end up in these conversations really talking to each other, and we forget that we're broadcast. So I can't see the comments on LinkedIn or on YouTube during the conversation unless I switch over to this other screen. So if you're watching live and you have something to say, please chime in, and we'll welcome you to it, or address your question or you share your comment. And I do check the videos later, probably every month or so. So if you do watch this, in a few weeks, you can comment and I'll respond, or send me a message and I'll respond there. Okay, so since reading this book, everything keeps coming back to it. So this month it's Leadership and Self-Deception. And the subtitle is The Secret to Transforming Relationships and Unleashing Results. It's by the Arbinger Institute, who are global. It's a global consulting firm that focuses on company leadership. And let me see what else I wrote down about them. Over here. Conflict resolution was another thing they have on their website. Leadership, conflict resolution, and organization change. So similar to the work that I do, and a little bit different, and they're huge, so they're a lot bigger too. But the reason this book got on our list was I saw it was published, or the 4th version came out last year, and I read it, the first version, when it came out, and I remember loving it so much, and it flipped a switch in my head, so I figured out some of the things that it's talking about. I think I was kind of close to it, but hadn't gotten there. So I loved it, and it was really life-changing. But so then when it came out last year, I thought, okay, we'll put it on the list and we'll share it with people so other people can benefit from it. So then in reading this new version over the last week, I was like, oh, wait a minute, I need this again too. So it was kind of funny, right up involved in the whole book. So I really appreciated the opportunity to read it again and be reminded of some of these things that we could take as simple. Or
that's interesting how you comment about that, because I've got multiple books. I mean, several of them that I've read more than once or twice, and some even 3 times. Whether I read it the first time for my own benefit and then took a group through it, or maybe it was something where, you know what, I just wanted to refresh on something because I thought there was concepts or topics that were highly relevant in that book. But I've got multiple books that I've read more than once, which seems counterintuitive, but I think if you're a lifelong learner, it's inevitable that's going to happen.
Yeah, I read the 4 Agreements every year. So that's not one that we've done on this, but and I've given it as gifts a lot. So highly recommend that one. So this book is it's told in the narrative format, and so the like the vice president of the organization has a meeting with 2 colleagues that are new to the company, one having come from the impact of a merger. So a very relatable scenario. And then the CEO or former CEO pops in, and the current CEO pops into the conversation. And then through that, you get the lessons. So there's not like a bunch of bullet pointed lists throughout the book and summary pages and that kind of thing. So it's a little different from some of the others that we read. But one of the first questions that they ask in here in that conversation in the meeting is Theo is I don't remember now, his title was vice president, or he wasn't the CEO, but one of the higher level. But he asked them, what does it mean to be a leader? So let's start our conversation there. What does it mean to be a leader?
And I think it's a wonderful lead-in. The question really always is, like you said, what is a leader? That leader is a person who can influence. I think that's really the way it's put together here. Oftentimes they think of somebody that's very strategic or very business-oriented, very finance-focused, somebody like that. I think the way we're using leadership in the topic today, it's somebody who demonstrates the softer skills. They're empathetic, they're good listeners, they're involved. They make tremendous eye contact. And then they have that unique ability, I think, to touch people in a certain way that inspires and motivates them. You obviously have said, how much time you spent in the culture space. And I'm always fascinated by that term because it's something that you can't see. It's not tangible, but you know it when you've got it, and you know it when you don't. And I was just taught, we had an individual who was leaving the company the other day, and I went and spoke with him, and I said, we often don't recognize when we're in what I call a gilded age, where we're just on a dream team, if you want to use the Michael Jordan analogy. And inevitably, people get promoted, they have other opportunities, people retire, whether it's an internal or external opportunity, and then the team just isn't quite the same. And as leaders, right, you say, well, why is that? Putting together that rock star dream team, it's not as easy as people think it is. And I think it's one of the most challenging skills of a leader, is to recruit talent and identify the right space. And your question was, what is a leader? I always say, putting together a legitimate sales plan, whether it's financial projections or strategic plan, and recruiting the right people, bringing the right people on the team. Those are 2, in my opinion, and I'd love to hear your input. Those are 2 of the hardest things for leaders to do. And there are those rare individuals who are extremely, extremely good at it, whether they attract people to their environment, whether they attract people to their business and their team, or whether they're just good at identifying them and recruiting them. And then obviously people that I call it vision casting, the people that have that unique skill to be able to say, you know what, it's not where we're at. And I was used to Gretzky analogy, right? Skating to where the puck's going to be, and being able to drive their organizations in that futuristic type momentum, if you will, or that path. We've all seen failed leaders, right? That they didn't attract good people. They were reactionary rather than strategic, and obviously their businesses either floundered or they weren't as successful as they probably could have been.
Or sometimes they're successful to a certain point, and then there's some change happens and they can't get around that. And that's happened to a lot of leaders in the last several years with all the change that's happened. And I wrote about it in 2017. And I don't remember if your class had this white paper that I wrote, peer reviewed, on the 5A model. Back in 2016-17, I wrote about all the changes then into management. And then here we are, it's even more. 9 years later, more changes and happening all at once, when changes used to happen sequentially, and now they're at the same time. So it's extra hard for managers. So I would just
I think business moves so fast, and with AI and tech and Gen and all these things, people's, I don't want to say their attention span, but their tolerance is just it's razor thin.
Yes.
I mean, CEOs aren't given a long leash the way they once were. They don't get that honeymoon period the way they once did. I mean, you either perform and deliver almost immediately, or boards have demonstrated it time and again they have a very short hook and a very short tolerance.
And that's getting shorter. So, but I would describe what the things that you said for the definition of a leader. I would say those actions are management. And so if we're talking about the job or the skills, sometimes people say things that indicate they think leaders are better than managers or more important than managers, and they're not. We need management to do management
Absolutely.
things. So I appreciate those things. The outcome of attracting the great people and being able to retain the great people. I would say what I think of leadership as is bringing out the best in people and then creating the environment so they can be their best. So that includes the things that you brought up. And some people aren't a fit for the environment that's created at a certain organization, and that's okay too. So give them the opportunity to go to an organization where they will be a better fit.
Yeah, we did cultures dare to, or what is it? People dare to create. No, it was people dare to create a something environment. I forget where it was, but it was exactly what you just said. Hey, I love, and they use the term love. Actually, I love you enough that I'm going to allow you to go to an environment where you can be successful. Because you're not going to be successful here. Yeah,
and they probably know it too, so it doesn't honor them to keep them there.
Yeah, people dare to build an intentional culture. That was the name of the book.
Okay, yeah. And so they start with that question in the book, in that meeting that the three folks are having. And it's interesting to see how their definitions and involvement changed. But what the point of asking it was, what gets in the way of that, what causes us not to be great leaders, is self-deception. And the book talks about self-deception and self-betrayal. And one of the main points of it is, how often have you ever had a thought that you're going to do something, help somebody, send somebody something, do something nice, and then you don't follow through with it? There's examples in the book about the newborn baby that's crying in the night, and the husband knows he should get up because he's the one that heard it first, but he thinks about it, but he doesn't really want to. But then he does get up and take care of the little child at 1 a.m. or something. And then he's resentful of it because he has an early meeting the next day. And several examples where the woman is the one making that decision. But, so many times in life that we think of things and then we justify not doing those. Did any examples come to mind for you? Or?
I thought of so many of them, particularly within my role, where I was thinking, as I was reading it, I kept thinking of helping people. Well, that's not really helping, right? It's just demonstrating initiative. It's demonstrating empathy. It's demonstrating what I call a level of care. And you and I have talked about it. I mean, I'm a fan of 𝗫𝗫, who's the CEO of Korn Ferry, and he writes extensively. He's got several books. He does a blog. It doesn't come out every week, but for a guy who's a CEO of an organization of that size, I mean, he's constantly talking about empathy, and for some of the things that he publishes, I think, are probably, most of us wouldn't feel comfortable being that vulnerable in a public platform the way he is. And again, as I was reading the book, I kept going back to this idea, and I call it the man in the mirror, of always reflecting on yourself and being very self-aware. And those are the themes that started to resonate throughout the book of, am I self-aware? Am I conscious of the aura that I'm projecting? Do I have positive energy? And then obviously, I don't know that I would necessarily putting others first, but certainly being considerate and mindful of how I'm impacting others, or the inverse of that, of not impacting others, or maybe negatively impacting them. But the book, as I read it, where my mind went, it wasn't so much about strategic and leadership and culture and management. It was more about self-reflection and introspection, if you want to think about that, really kind of getting comfortable with who you are as a person. And to your point, I mean, it kind of calls you out in a certain way. If you're not living up to a standard that you believe if you're not living up to the standard that you're projecting, the book will definitely put you on notice that it's time for a change.
And I would challenge anyone that thinks they are all the time needs to read the book again.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's hard, it's not. it's, different situations make it harder or easier. So
Right. No, I think the way you said it, it's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know that sounds very fundamental, very elementary, very simple, but it's hard.
Yeah. Well, and so the in the head thinking, one of the main points is the self-deception is where we end up justifying our own behaviors. And so I had an example, and I'm sure I've had millions, but these came to mind just this week in reading it. But going to a meeting the other day, and I was running late, which I cannot stand. I never like to be the last one to arrive. And so I was running, this was to a lunch yesterday. So I was running a little bit late. And so then driving faster than I prefer not to be a speeder. Then I'd go to get on the highway and the person coming along didn't let me merge. And so I love having vocabulary words in the car. That's kind of a little hobby of how many words can I put together, and not words I'm going to say on this broadcast. But I just had this moment, just very, very short, but of saying the words, and I didn't flip them off or do anything to them or anything like that, but just in my own head and I said some words out loud, but I was mad at them for not letting me in. But what this book would say, no, you're mad at yourself for running late. So recognize that, and then you won't be as mean when you get to the meeting. Or also to get to the meeting and then say, oh, I'm so sorry that I'm late. This person wouldn't let me in traffic. And then there was a crash that I had to be delayed for. And, then you start blaming other people, blaming other things when the real problem was within in the first place. And then becoming the center of attention about it is also self-deception, because now the conversation would be about me being late instead of about great to see you and how nice of us to be together.
Right. Well, I tell people all the time, whenever I'm engaged with somebody where the conversation, the tone isn't quite what I expected, I don't know what happened before I got there. Habit 5, right? Seek first understand. And we use those open-ended questions with how and what. And by teasing that information out of whoever I'm engaging with, oftentimes I come to understand exactly why they are the way they are. And I always say people, you don't know, maybe they had a sick child at home, maybe their dog died, maybe their car didn't start, whatever the case may be. But those things, we have a tendency to bring that into the relationship, into the conversation, almost like, and then it sets the stage for what becomes not really what we intended, but because, like you said, I'm bringing all that with me. It's that deception piece. I'm not really angry at the person that I'm talking to. It's all these things that I'm dealing with, and they just happen to be the person that's in the fire. They end up receiving or bearing the brunt of everything that I'm bringing with me.
But then we justify that, and that's, I think, the big problem, because then that's the deception, right?
Yep, exactly.
You justify that, and they didn't even ask how I was, and so so what that I'm short, and I'm no, I'm not going to take notes for you in this meeting. I don't care that you have a broken arm. I'm busy too, or whatever. That didn't really happen to me. We become self-absorbed, I think, and they didn't use that word, but that's what kept coming to mind for me.
Right.
And so then another concept in there was collusion. So if how we're on camera here in like a box, and so they had they use a couple charts in the book. So if I think that you are deliberately not letting me merge, and you're deliberately withholding information and being siloed and all that, then how would I treat you? If I think somebody's doing that, how do I treat them? With suspicion, second guessing, need verification, go around them. So then I would do this.
Yeah, you think poorly, and that, I don't know what to say. We think poorly of somebody. So by thinking poorly of them, we judge them that way, and that creates an environment where then they do perform poorly, and by them performing poorly, now they validated what you had basically projected on them. That's kind of the version of collusion, and we see that all the time, where they use the example in the book of the gentleman had I think a teenage son who was into auto mechanics, and the father just couldn't bring himself to come to the idea that his son enjoyed that type of an activity or hobby, whatever the case may be. And so he reflected poorly on the son, and then the son acted up and basically justified the father's opinion of him. But as soon as the father recognized that and flipped the script, and came along beside the son and took an interest in his hobby, the entire dynamic changed.
Mm-hmm.
And the point that kept coming out of that to me was the role that we play in that in as the individual, and nothing more than our approach and our mindset. And the outcome couldn't have been any different than what it was originally. And the only thing that was different was really just the father's approach.
Yeah, and think of the difference that made to him, to the father, and then to the kid and to the dynamics in that family.
Exactly.
It's fantastic. And then also, then what do any of them bring to work and to the community activities they do, and just to life? You're really not going to be leading a great, fulfilling life if you're judging people all the time. And I learned that several years ago. I remember that finally sunk in, even though I'm still working on it. But I remember praying to God, but God, you made me so good at it. And then he says, but that's not what you're here to do. So
exactly.
It's a lot lighter of a burden to jump to positive conclusions about people, and to not automatically judge, oh, he's late all the time to my meetings because he doesn't respect me, instead of, oh, he has to drop his kid off at school and they change the time.
Exactly.
The conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Treat the person like a person.
That's and it's funny that you use that word treat, because that came up in the book again and again and again, right? Am I treating the person as a person, or am I treating the person as an object? And I have to fall on the sword here. I mean, when I was a young manager, I just saw people and individuals and team members as nothing more than widgets in the company culture that could contribute to outcome. And I often reflect back on some of my early years of being a supervisor, and I always say I was probably the worst version of myself at that age that I probably could have been. And I would so give anything to turn back the clock, being in my upper 50s, to go back to when I was a supervisor in my 20s and undo all of those things that I did. And if you've ever seen, the Christmas Story, where Mr. Cratchit gets to go back in time, that's exactly the way I felt, because I was not a good supervisor. I was not abusive, but I just wasn't as human to the people that worked for me at the time as I might have been. And now that I'm obviously older and seasoned and probably have a better understanding of how to interact with people, I would give anything to go back and have a mulligan and have a redo. Obviously, we don't get that joy.
Yes, same. And not being able to relate because I wasn't in their, didn't have their same experiences. And I remember people doing the same to me. I remember early on them saying, just wait until she gets married and has kids, and then she won't work all these hours, or she won't be on top of things. And, and then back then too, of why would the new dad need to take more than a day or two off work when the baby's born? That's the people would.
And it's funny that you bring up, that was before you had children.
Yes, and I didn't have children, it turns out. So my husband had a daughter, right? Yeah, this was way back, right after undergrad, right out of school.
Oh, it's funny that, and we're getting way personal here. So I was a supervisor in a production line, and there was a young lady that got pregnant, of course, and she had to be on the line. It was a production line, as I said. And as she got further and further along in her pregnancy, she had to go to the bathroom and those kind of things. And I had no empathy for that whatsoever. And she came back one particular time, and she was literally in tears. And to your point, I hadn't been a father. I hadn't been through pregnancies before. And now looking back, and that's one of my biggest fails, I think, is just lacking empathy to understand exactly what that young lady was going through.
Yeah.
And I couldn't have been more of a bore to her than anybody. It was just terrible. So something to be said for experience, I guess.
Yes. Well, and hopefully people can do better than we did in those days before this book was there, because
good point.
The book would feel like a slap upside the head to both of us for those days. So, and you mentioned treating people like an object, and I had taken a note about what that means is what objectifying means in the book is seeing people as obstacles in your way, or as vehicles to get you what you want, or they're not relevant at all. So so thinking about how you treat people, I'm not saying this to you, Brett, but to anybody that listens, think about how you view the people that report up to you, or your peers, other people in the organization, maybe even people in your family or in your kids' activities or schools. And
so it's a great call out here, and I've got a relatable story to that. the best way to reflect on this, and I'm looking for validation from you, Kelly, think about people that think about people that you come into contact with, and not being deliberate in your way of teasing something out of them, asking about their kids, asking about their wife, asking about their hobbies and activities. But just think, do people approach you, and are you approachable, where when they approach you, they want to share a story with you? And I always think to myself, right, if I'm receptive, if I'm open, if I'm warm, the likelihood that people will want to share those things with me. And then if I give them my time, that's a reflection on how they view me. And maybe they have a want or need to share, maybe they have a want or need to talk, whatever the case may be. But it's not so much what you do or say, but how you receive that conversation. I'll share a story. I had a lady come the other day, and she shared with me what she was doing outside of work. She joined a board, and she was doing some volunteering. And she said, "I knew you would be so proud of me for doing that." And in the moment, I didn't really appreciate what she said, but she knows me well enough of who I am, what I stand for, what my values are, that she was eager to share that story with me. And basically, and for her to make the comment, "I knew you would be so proud of me."
Oh, that's fantastic.
Really touched me. Yeah. And it's that idea, right, of seeing people as people, meeting people where they are, versus considering all people as an object. Now, I'm not going to get on a soapbox, because the book talks about being in the box or out of the box. And we can be both, right? We can be in the box, which is kind of being closed off, I guess is the best way to say it, with some people, but being open and out of the box, air quotes, with other people. So it's not as if you're always one or you're always other. You can move back and forth between the two. It's as if you can be non-judgmental in a certain environment with a certain individual, and then literally flip the script only seconds or minutes later and go back to being judgmental. To me, it's a continuum, and it's very fluid based on the situation and then how you interact or not with any individual.
And it's about what you do. So her saying, that lady coming to you and telling you, because she said she knew you would be proud of her. And that's amazing that it's not that you said those words, you've demonstrated that in some way, so that's the proof. That's how
where my mind went is, hey, we've created a relationship, we've created a connection, and that takes time, those connections and relationships are built over time with trust. I truly believe this. I was with a prospective customer a couple of weeks ago, and we spent an hour just talking, and then she had to leave to go pick up her kids, which was fine. That was planned. But in our hour, she mentioned the word trust 4 times. And that's a word that's like a trigger word for me. If I hear the word trust, it just, for whatever reason, I just resonates with me. And we got to the end of our time, and I knew we were running short, and the lady's name was Michelle. And I said, "Michelle," I'm pretty certain you've mentioned the word trust 4 times in our 45 minutes together. I said, "By chance, is trust one of your company's core values?" And she said, "Interestingly enough, it is." And then I made the comment, and I say this often, I said, "I would rather have your trust and your respect than your business." And she looked at me kind of funny, and she said, "What do you mean by that?" And she said, "If you don't trust me, I just soon we part as friends, and you buy your products from somebody else." I said, I'm a very big proponent of trust. And I said, once we've built some trust, if we get to that point, then let's talk about doing business together. But I said, let's start there. And it was amazing how just her guard just went down at that point, is the best way to say it. And, obviously we're working on some projects now and more to follow on that. But I think just being able to verbalize the word trust, and again, what are we talking about? It's deception and being out of the box. It's an example that says, hey, I'm out of the box with you.
Yeah, fantastic. Also, if the customer doesn't trust you, what is that going to do in the business? They're going to second guess, undermine, cut, ask for lower prices. They're not going to be easy to work with either. So that's going to be time consuming to try to build that if they're starting off on a negative way. So, and same at work, at home, and at the grocery store, they use some examples in the book about that. So working to build that up.
We're in the interest of time here. Hybrid and remote work has gotten to be very, very popular, very, very common. Depending on what trades you're reading, what headlines you're reading, I'm sure there's a lot of, hey, we're being called back to the office, but there's still a quite a bit of hybrid and remote work. And then we think about creating these relationships, being out of the box, creating meaningful connections. And how does the hybrid remote environment either contribute or not to that? So kind of an interesting comment that you made in the pregame. So if you're in the box, what we can assume things, particularly in email, and so much of the communication is in email, and it can be construed because it's without emotion. And simply not responding to an email could create tension in the relationship and put, me and that other person, or the other person and I, back in the box, right? And it doesn't create the optimal relationship. It's difficult. Everything I do is in person. I have a lot of Zoom calls and things like that, but I don't really work in a remote environment. You might be better skilled or better prepared to talk to that than I am, but I would certainly expect that for those people that are working in that environment, you have to be deliberate, you have to be disciplined, and you have to literally go out of your way, I think, to do more than those of us who are working more in a in-person, on-premise environment.
Yeah, and even the in-person has to make sure we're paying attention to more than just the tasks at hand, because in person we can take the relationship for granted. So I became a big believer in the power of uniting with people when you're not face-to-face, because I met my husband, who lived in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I lived in Kansas City, and we met on a Notre Dame football fan board. So not on a dating site. It was before that was around. Maybe those were kind of new, but yeah, we met on a football board where it's not cameras or anything like that. It was before Facebook and everything, but and we all had handles, so people didn't know each other's real names and stuff. So on the early days, several of us became friends on there. Hundreds of people became friends on there, and then we got to know each other. We started having chats, the whole group of us having chats inside that board. And then they spun off. There's a football board where you only talk about Notre Dame football and do not talk about anything else. And then the back room, like the back room of a bar. But in that back room, I tell you, if you post something about, hey, I'm going to be traveling to Kansas City in 3 weeks, does anybody have recommendations? People are going to say something about my name and my husband's name and a few others. Contact them and they'll tell you where to go. And if they need something, we'd help them, or if we can meet up, we meet up. But if they're coming for work, they don't have time to meet. But I would, we do anything. You could post you were running or biking and hurt your knee, and within a minute, orthopedic surgeons are going to respond with some tips. So it's just a variety of things. So we bonded without ever meeting in person, and for several years, and then met in person. Oh, he came here, and all I would commit to was picking him up at the airport and dropping him off at the hotel. So I was not going to commit to spending a whole weekend or anything with this person that I had not met in real life. Hadn't even seen a picture. So yeah, so I know that's possible. And talking about it the other day with somebody, and I said, in fact, back then when he lived in Pittsburgh, we would spend hours on the phone every day. And at the end of the day, on the phone for an hour, 2 hours, I have to tell you, we've been married now 13 years. We don't sit there face to face for 2 hours at the end of every day now talking. We're doing other stuff and we're together. But, you're not doing that too often, just talking face to face. So I think
that's a great story.
Yeah, the connection was established, and because we relied on communication and honesty and openness. So before, it wasn't just presence. But one of the actions that they recommend in the book, I think, that came out of it is, I think it was in this new version, was to make the effort to get to know people and be open to people and be about them. And then, talk about them, understand them, seek to understand. And then that's how you can build these bonds through.
Well, I wrote down just a simple line, right? See people as people, not as problems. And oftentimes, hey, you see somebody walking in the hall, walking into your office, and this is my favorite tagline, with caller ID being what it is. I always say, I want to be the guy that when I call and you see my name and number on caller ID, that you're literally crawling through cut glass and walking through fire to get to the phone. And then there are others, right, where I see their name on caller ID, and either I hit, the red button, or I just let it go to voicemail. And I do everything I can to not be that guy, right? I want to be the guy that when you see my name and number, you're literally scrambling to get to the phone because you don't want to miss that call. Obviously, that has a lot to do with having bringing value on that phone call. but obviously being engaged and being inviting and being a warm person.
Instead of having them think, dang, I wish he would have just texted.
Exactly.
Well, and you mentioned being a value. Being a value means that you're listening to them to know what they would perceive as valuable. And so you're owning that in the relationship, instead of, if you get mad, they send you to voicemail and they don't return the call.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, wow, what a jerk that they did that. Okay, well, no, maybe it's because you've been all about trying to sell them stuff.
Exactly.
Like getting
we always ask, you know, do you recommend this book or not? This one was unique. I mean, I think it's got applications. I don't know that I would recommend it for everybody. That it was interesting. This is, I think, level 1, and there's a level 2 and level 3. And I might be using the words wrong, but they basically say this is stage 1 and maybe
of their courses. I think so.
Yeah, but I would be interested to know what stage 2 and 3 look like, and if there's a book, or if you have to actually go to the foundation or university to figure that out. But my whole point is, so who's the book for, right? If you're finding that the relationships that you're involved with aren't as fulfilling as maybe they could be, if you're finding that there's tension, you know, and I don't want to say that you're going through tough times or bad luck or something like that, but if you're one of those people who just has that kind of burning sensation to say, you know what, something's just not right. Oftentimes, you know, and they use this 𝗧𝗵𝗲, this Hungarian physician. Usually the common thing in all of those relationships is you. And
right.
the way they used it in the book is this doctor in Hungary, he was working in a birth ward. I think that's how they reframed it. And they had just a tremendously high death rate. I think 50% is what they said. And this gentleman went on vacation, and while he was on vacation, the birth rate, or the mortality rate dropped, the birth rate increased, and then he came back and immediately went back to the poor statistics that they had. And the whole point was that this gentleman, I guess, worked part-time, or part of his time was spent in the morgue, and cadavers, you know, conveyed germs to him. This was in the 1800s, I believe it was. Yeah. And then he would bring this infection or this germ into the maternity ward, and obviously, you know, these people perish. But it was kind of the evolution of germ technology. The whole point was he was the common factor, and we apply that into ourselves and say, you know, I'm having trouble at home, I'm having trouble at work, I'm having trouble with maybe my parents, my grandparents, my neighbors, and you start to look at that. Well, it isn't as if the whole world is bad. You're the common touch point in there. This is a book for that person, right? To say, okay, I have to get myself right before I can get right with everybody else. And it's pretty interesting, I believe. And I'm a student of people. I love people. But you look at people and you say, well, how come is the guy who's got a great family and a great marriage and a great relationship with his kids, how come is he also successful at work? And there are anomalies, right, where people have tremendous professional careers and then they just can't seem to carry it on outside their work. But, you know, that's usually the guy that you want on your church committee, or you want in your club, or you want in your neighborhood HOA, or and you know, the commonality, the common connection between all those is that person. I early in my career, I was one of those, what I call 200 hotel nights a year kind of guy, right? You do the math, you figure out what that actually means. It's 4 nights a week, every week. And I was one of those guys. And my family kind of created a rhythm and a vibe, you know, to survive and do what they needed to do without me. And then I would come home and it would create an entirely different energy in that. And, you know, the kids were happy and my wife was happy when I wasn't there. And then I got, and they weren't so happy. Well, you know, what's the recipe here? Well, I was obviously the toxin in the room, and obviously it wasn't them that needed to change, it was me. But for those of you who've probably been one of those 200 hotel night year people, whether it's a guy or a gal, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I've had that too. I agree with you about who it's for, and I would like to even simplify it. That it's, if you find yourself having the negative energy of, you know, what's wrong with these people, or why isn't anybody doing this, or, you know, if you have thoughts like that on a regular basis, read this book, or just any negative thoughts on a regular basis. We are not here on this earth to be miserable. We are here to have an extraordinary experience. So if you're not seeing beyond the negative side, this book can help you understand there is something else to see. And we know what we know, so this can help you know a little bit more about the perspectives that are out there. So I would say if you're caught in that sometimes, or just more than you would like, I'm sure that people that listen to us, that watch this, they're not going to be people that are jerks all the time. We're not jerks all the time. We just are jerks on accident sometimes.
Well, my mind kept going back to Mel Robbins and the 𝗨𝗏𝗻, which we did a couple of months ago. And again, that was a lot of introspection, self-reflection, man in the mirror type things. And this book kind of ties not directly into that, but again, working on you, working on self. And so often, I think the people that are in those challenging moments, they want everybody else to change, right? What are you going to do? It's not about what you're going to do. It's about what I'm going to do. And what do I control? I control me, and I control what I do, and I control my behavior and my emotions. And once I'm right with the world and I get me right, it's amazing how the rest of the things come into focus pretty clearly.
Yep. That was one of the topics at the lunch that I made it to yesterday, and I was on time. Yes. That's one of the things that we talked about, and I was on time. I wasn't even late. Okay, here's the link, voyagecg.com/leadership books. That's to the leadership book of the month page. And this month I did create a reflection for you. So you can go download it for free. You don't have to give an email address or anything. Just grab that, and then you'll see the list of the next books. A month from now is Adam Grant's Hidden Potential: The Science of Achieving Great Things, from Adam Grant. So that'll be September 25th. So we will be back.
So Kelly and I always talk about why we do this, right? And we developed and it's a takeaway from Cynic, right? To inspire leaders of tomorrow to invest in themselves today. We get our validation, and I'm speaking for Kelly, hopefully I'm not on the line here, and our gratification. I'd love to get somebody to drop us a note to say, I read a book. It doesn't even have to be a book that we're recommending. Maybe it's a book that we've covered. Maybe give us a book suggestion. We're putting together our schedule for 2026, knock on wood, and we would love to have you suggest a book that you found meaningful. Think of the genre that we cover, right? I mean, it's not nonfiction, that type of stuff. So send us a book that fits, personal development, culture, leadership, communication, organizational behavior, a book that fits that type of an audience. And, we'll certainly consider it. We're always interacting with authors, which I'm so blessed to be able to have that type of a network, to be able to talk to authors and interact with them on LinkedIn. But anyway, what's my point? That's what drives us, right? This is inspirational. We don't get paid. This isn't a sponsored podcast, but nothing thrills me more or warms my heart more than for somebody to say, you know what, because of our engagement on this podcast, on this conversation, I was inspired to pick up a book. That's all I need, and that'll keep me going for a long time.
And I do hear from people that say that, or send a note or comment, and that will pick up a book because of one of the ones that we've talked about over the years. So
love that.
And I've even given the list out. You'll see summaries of, or the links to all of the videos on the webpage, and people can go look at all the books and pick the ones that, whatever situation you're in now, we've probably covered something related to it. So you can check it out in 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour sometimes, but get something out of it. So
well, and if you're, I'm sure everybody knows this, right? But if you want, you can listen to a YouTube broadcast at 1.25 or 1.3 or 1.35. So maybe our conversation is 50 minutes, but you speed it up.
Yeah, there you go.
You can. I'm serious.
Yes.
I mean,
I love it.
I love to be as efficient as I can, and that's a way to speed things up. So you can consume our content at something a lot quicker than our talk time is.
And that, to keep us efficient, that's also why we do these live and don't edit, so that we flub sometimes or have to repeat or whatever. That's just how it is.
So when are we on next month? We're on
the 25th.
25th. All right, great. And it's Adam Grant. So yeah, we are excited about that. Adam's obviously very, very prominent, highly regarded. I mean, we haven't covered him that I'm aware of.
I don't think so.
I've read a few of his books, but he does a great job, and I'm sure it will be an exciting conversation.
Yeah. Well, this one was today too. So thank you so much. Thanks for it. And thank you for everyone for watching. And we will look forward to seeing you or hearing from you in the next few weeks. Thanks, everyone. Take care.